My name is Stella. Standing on the porch of what was once my childhood home, I watched as the chaos unfolded before me. The housewarming party that was supposed to be a celebration of my sister's so-called new beginning had turned into a complete fiasco. The guests, once dressed in their finest, were now scurrying out like rats leaving a sinking ship, their faces a mix of shock and disgust. My mother, who had always been the epitome of false elegance, stood there, her face pale and contorted with rage. Her once perfect hair was disheveled, and her expensive velvet gown was now a mess. My sister, Lily, was in a corner, sobbing hysterically, her once shimmering gold dress covered in dust. And my brother-in-law, Ethan, was pacing back and forth, his face red with anger and humiliation. It was a sight I had been waiting for, a moment of sweet revenge after years of being mistreated by my family. But how did we get here? Let me take you back. I grew up in a family where appearances were everything. My mother, Mrs. Thompson, was obsessed with maintaining an image of wealth and status. She lived in a large, sprawling house in the suburbs, surrounded by all the trappings of a luxurious lifestyle. But behind the shiny facade, she was drowning in debt. My sister, Lily, 28 years old, was the golden child. She never had to work a day in her life, yet she always had the latest designer clothes and the most expensive gadgets. She married Ethan, a 30-year-old who claimed to be a successful entrepreneur. But in reality, his businesses were constantly on the verge of collapse, and he relied on my mother's money to keep them afloat. I, on the other hand, was the responsible one. I was a certified public accountant and had built my own financial consulting firm from the ground up. After a painful divorce, I was raising my 5-year-old daughter, Ava, and 7-year-old son, Max, on my own. My mother and sister always looked down on me, thinking I was just a boring accountant who didn't know how to have fun. One Thanksgiving, we were all gathered at my mother's house for dinner. The table was set with expensive crystal glasses and a catered turkey, but the atmosphere was tense. Ethan was bragging about his new sports car, a shiny red Ferrari that he claimed to have bought with cash. He was going on and on about how successful his business was and how he was going to make millions. I sat quietly at the end of the table, cutting up food for my kids. I couldn't help but think about the unpaid invoices he had racked up on my company's account. A few months ago, he had charged over $2,000 worth of high-end construction materials to my firm without my permission. When I confronted him, he just laughed it off and promised to pay me back, but I never saw a cent. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I looked at Ethan and said, "That's a beautiful car, Ethan. Since your business is doing so well, I assume you're ready to pay off the $2,500 you owe my firm for those construction materials you charged last July." The room went dead silent. Lily dropped her fork, and my mother's smile vanished. Ethan stared at me, his eyes narrowing. "Are you seriously bringing this up at the Thanksgiving dinner table?" He sneered. I calmly replied, "You've been bragging about your wealth for the past 10 minutes. It seemed like the perfect time to discuss your outstanding debts." Ethan pushed his chair back violently. "You're unbelievable, Stella. You're just a jealous, bitter woman who can't stand to see us succeed. You're a glorified calculator, sitting in your little office counting other people's money." I didn't flinch. Visionary entrepreneurs pay their suppliers, Ethan. Otherwise, it's just stealing. That was the last straw for my mother. She slammed her hand on the table, making the glasses rattle. "How dare you come into my home and disrespect your brother-in-law like this? He's family, Stella. Family doesn't nickel and dime each other over some stupid construction materials." I looked directly at my mother. "It's $2,500, Mom. I'm a single mother running a business. I can't afford to subsidize his extravagant lifestyle." My mother stood up, her face red with anger. "Oh, please don't play the victim. You've always been so selfish. You're just jealous of Lily. You've always been jealous of her success." Lily chimed in, crossing her arms. You're being completely toxic, Stella. Ethan is working on a huge real estate deal. $2,500 is nothing to him. He just forgot about it. I countered, if it's nothing, then he can write me a check right now. Ethan scoffed. I'm not writing you a check. You insulted me in front of my mother-in-law. Consider that debt cancelled as a tax for your terrible attitude. My mother then pointed at me and said, you will apologize to Ethan right now. You will stand up, look him in the eye, and beg for his forgiveness for ruining this family dinner. I stood up straight, my voice steady. I will not apologize for asking a grown man to pay his bills. Ethan is a fraud, and you're enabling him. I'm done playing pretend. My mother gasped. How dare you? You're nothing but a bitter, jealous woman. You can't stand to see Lily happy. You want everyone to be as miserable as you are. Lily started sobbing and buried her face in Ethan's shoulder. Ethan wrapped his arm around her and glared at me. This house is for Lily and me. You're not welcome here anymore. Get out. My mother then marched into the hallway, grabbed our coats, and threw them out onto the porch. Leave, she ordered. I looked at my kids, who were shivering in their thin clothes. I knelt down and wrapped their coats around them. It's okay, kids. We're going home. As we walked out into the freezing snow, I could hear Ethan's mocking voice behind me. See you later, loser. But what they didn't know was that I had been one step ahead of them. A few months ago, my mother had come to me in a panic. She had failed to pay her property taxes for 3 consecutive years, and the county was going to foreclose on the house. She owed $36,000 in back taxes and penalties. Instead of just giving her the money, I had my limited liability company purchase the county tax lien certificate. I let her think I was just bailing her out, but in reality, I was making a strategic move. Under state law, she had a 6-month redemption period to pay my company back the $36,000 plus interest. But she never did. She ignored all the legal notices, thinking I had taken care of everything. When the redemption period expired, I filed for a tax lien foreclosure. A few weeks ago, a judge signed the final order, and the property was officially transferred to my company. A few days after the Thanksgiving incident, Ethan came to my office. He was wearing an expensive suit and carrying a thick manila envelope. He interrupted a meeting with one of my high-paying clients and demanded that I sign a quit-claim deed, waiving any future inheritance rights to the house. He said, "Your mother is transferring the deed of the house to us next week." My lawyer advised me to make sure there are no loose ends. "You're going to sign this paper." I looked at him, a calm smile on my face. I knew that a quit-claim deed only transferred whatever interest the grantor currently held, and since my mother had lost the house to foreclosure, she held 0 interest. I took the pen and signed the paper without hesitation. Ethan was shocked. He thought he had one, but little did he know that he was holding a completely worthless piece of paper. 2 days later, my mother invited me to a family lunch at a fancy country club. She was surrounded by her wealthy friends, and Lily and Ethan were there, looking smug. My mother announced that she was transferring the house to Lily and Ethan. Her friends gushed about what a generous gesture it was. I just sat there, quietly eating my food. I casually remarked, "It certainly makes financial sense for Ethan. He doesn't have to put a single dollar down." Ethan glared at me, and my mother shot me a warning look. "Stella, please don't ruin this beautiful moment with your bitterness." I looked at my mother. Just like Lily needed my college fund to pay for her luxury wedding a few years ago? The table went silent. My mother's face turned red. That was different. I had every right to use that money to ensure Lily had a respectable start to her marriage. I smiled tightly. "You forged my signature to drain that account, Mom. But I managed just fine. I built my firm without your help." After lunch, I went back to my office. I decided it was time to pull the plug on their perfect little illusion. I had been paying for the water, electricity, gas, and homeowners insurance for the house for years, out of a sense of family duty. But they had taken my kindness for granted. I logged into the utility company websites and disabled the automatic payment features. I scheduled the water, gas, and electricity to be shut off on Friday afternoon, just in time for their big housewarming party. On Friday evening, I was at home, enjoying a peaceful dinner with my kids. I knew that at that moment, 10 miles away, the house was descending into chaos. Sure enough, within minutes, my phone started buzzing with texts from my mother and Lily. They were panicking, asking me to turn the utilities back on. Ethan was threatening to call the police. I ignored their messages. Let them deal with the consequences of their actions. The next day, a contractor, Mr. Johnson, showed up at the house to start the kitchen demolition. Ethan tried to convince him to start work without paying a deposit, saying that my mother would take out a home equity line of credit. But Mr. Johnson was a smart man. He ran a credit check on my mother and found out that she had a low credit score and multiple accounts in collections. He also discovered that I was the financial guarantor for the property from a previous roof repair. Mr. Johnson called me, and I explained the situation to him. I told him that Ethan and Lily had no equity in the house and that they were being legally evicted. He decided to pack up his tools and leave. Later that day, my mother showed up at my apartment, crying and begging for help. She said that the party was a disaster and that she needed me to write her a check for $10,000 to fix the kitchen and turn the utilities back on. I looked at her, my heart cold. No, Mom. I'm not giving you a single dime. You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences. My mother's face turned from pleading to angry. You're a greedy, miserable witch. I knew you would do this. You planned this whole thing. I opened the door and said, "It's time for you to leave, Mom." She stormed out, threatening to cut me off completely. But I didn't care. I had finally taken control of my life and stood up to my toxic family. On Saturday evening, I drove to the house. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, and the sound of generators could be heard from a distance. I parked my car and waited for the deputies to arrive. At 6:55, Ethan took the stage in the half-demolished kitchen. He was holding the quit-claim deed I had signed and was boasting about how the house was now his. The guests were clapping and cheering. But then, the deputies arrived. I walked up the driveway with them, and when we opened the door, a blast of cold air swept through the house. The party came to a sudden halt. My mother and Ethan were in shock. Ethan tried to convince the deputies that I was a crazy woman and that the quit-claim deed was valid. But the deputy calmly explained that it was a standard quit-claim deed and that my mother had no legal right to transfer the property. I stepped forward and explained the whole situation to everyone. I told them about my mother's unpaid property taxes, my purchase of the tax lien, and the foreclosure. The room was silent as the truth sank in. Ethan's face turned white, and Lily started wailing. The guests looked at each other in disbelief. The deputy then announced that everyone had 30 minutes to leave the property or they would be arrested for trespassing. The guests quickly grabbed their things and fled. Ethan was still in denial. He called his lawyer, but the lawyer told him that there was nothing he could do. The deed was valid, and he had no case. My mother, who had always been so proud and haughty, was now a broken woman. She tried to beg me for mercy, but I was done with her manipulations. I watched as they all left the house, their lives in ruins. I walked into the empty house, feeling a sense of peace. The house that had been a source of so much pain and drama was finally mine. In the following weeks, Ethan filed for divorce and disappeared. Lily was forced to get a job at a local store to pay off the debt from the kitchen demolition. My mother moved into a small, dingy apartment and was shunned by her wealthy friends. I sold the house to a real estate developer for $850,000. I used the money to open trust accounts for my kids' college education and to take them on a luxury vacation to Italy. Sitting on a balcony in Florence, sipping a glass of wine, I reflected on what had happened. I had learned that true family is not about blood ties but about mutual respect and love. I had finally broken free from the toxic cycle and was building a new, happy life for myself and my children.